good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of Voices from Our Schools. I'm your host, Kimberly Stender, and I welcome you to our program. Today I welcome two central office employees who are instrumental in acquiring data which evaluates our educators. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Mike Morris and Doug Slaughter.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Welcome. So we usually begin the show by letting you talk a little bit about yourselves and letting our audience know a little bit more about you in terms of your education and honestly how you came to work in the Amherst Public Schools. So Mike, would you like to start?
Sure. So I was fortunate enough to come into the Amherst Public Schools in 2001, and I spent 6 years as a 5th and 6th grade teacher at Fort River Elementary School here in Amherst. Prior to that, I was a student at Amherst College and got my master's in elementary education at UMass. I loved my time at Fort River, but did go back to school to get an advanced degree in education administration and was the assistant principal for one and the principal for 4 years at Crocker Farm Elementary School. And this year, the superintendent asked me to come up and to lead the charge in terms of the new educator evaluation system, as well as assisting with assessments and professional development activities across the district.
Okay, so you also work with Dr. Rhonda Cohen.
Very closely, and
Yes.
Dr. Ian Stith in our Department of Teaching and Learning.
And this is sort of a new group that formed really just this past few months this got going.
Absolutely, and it's a collaborative group that what's exciting is we feel like we're getting a lot done in a short amount of time, and we are in schools quite often, and that feels very different for some central, being a central office person, one of my concerns was that I wouldn't be in schools seeing kids, seeing teachers, and fortunately I'm in schools quite frequently, and I think the idea of being central office staff, that we do spend a lot of time at central office, but we're also directly connected to the work of schools is really an important one.
Absolutely, and I know you're a welcome presence in all of our buildings.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And Doug, how about you? How did you get to work in the central office?
Well, I came to Amherst in August of 1989 to pursue graduate studies in chemical engineering, and have remained here since. I started working for the schools in 2006. In the central office area, I've worked in the central office the whole time, primarily in the information systems department, and I've always been a bit of what I call a data wrangler. So, at the time that I first started, one of the things that was coming on was a data collection called EPIMS, which had to do with collecting detailed information about who our educators are, what their certification status was, and that sort of thing. That was one of the first projects I worked on, and so since that time I've been working on that and other things that relate to getting information into and out of our various systems. So whether it be for reporting to the state or for trying to get information to teachers in the classroom or principals in their buildings to do things, that's the kind of work I've been doing over the last few years.
We really rely on you and your expertise. I mean, you're just an amazing person when it comes to IS and technology.
Thank you.
So you're our go-to person.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining me. So, and you're also a coach at the high school on the football team.
That's correct, I'm an assistant coach.
That's great. So it's nice to always give back too. So educator evaluation, what is this? I mean, this is a new concept in a sense, and I'm really not quite sure how it fits into our school, so perhaps you can explain that.
Sure. So we've had a teacher evaluation system for quite some time. It was edited about 5-6 years ago in recent contract negotiations at that time. But Massachusetts is one of the Race to the Top states. So Race to the Top is President Obama, Arne Duncan's major educational initiative. And one of the things they realize is within states, across states, and even sometimes within districts, there are very different evaluation procedures of how we're evaluating superintendents, administrators, and teachers. And we can all agree that's not good. We want to have fair, consistent practices around it that really promote our best teaching. And so they set up some requirements around if you want to be a Race to the Top state, you had to have certain things in place. One of them was to revise your educator evaluation system. What's a little unique in Massachusetts as compared to many other Race to the Top states is that the major teachers association in our state, the MTA, was really integral in the development of this plan. So in December 2010, they came out with a framework of what high-quality educator evaluation systems could look like, and no one was happier than our state Department of Education because they had a great blueprint to work from. So it's a tiered rollout. So last year, level 4 districts had to implement this new educator evaluation system. This year, all the Race to the Top districts did. We are a Race to the Top district. And by next year, all the districts in the entire Commonwealth will be implementing this new system, replacing their old system. There are some things that are negotiated locally, but the major tenets are kind of defined by the agreement that the MTA and the state came up with around it.
Now, you mentioned that teachers, administrators, and the superintendent are all evaluated under this system. Do they all have the same criteria, or is this something separate depending on the job that they do?
There are some differences, but what I would call them parallel systems. So the rating categories are all very similar. Everyone has standards. The standards documents are slightly different if you're a superintendent versus a teacher versus a principal. But they really are all focused on making sure for the teachers, for instance, there's 4 standards. One is around curriculum assessment and planning, integral activities certainly. The second one is really around instruction for all students, with the key phrase being all. The third part is really focused on the family and community outreach. What are we doing to keep our community appraised of what we're doing, communicating how kids are doing to families, and making sure that connection is strong. And the fourth standard is really around professional culture, so collaboration. A lot of the things that we've been working on, we're fortunate at Amherst, we've been working on for the last couple of years, are really connected around our professional culture and development. And those are the teacher ones. They're reflected also in the principal and the superintendent branches as well. There are also similarities. Everyone's writing a self-assessment, which is a reflective exercise to identify strengths and areas that folks need to work on, and that's everybody from the superintendent, principals, central office administrators, and teachers. Everyone's coming up with goals. One's around professional practice, one's around student learning, so one's around growing as an instructor, and one's really about our outcomes for students. And everyone's writing a plan of how they're going to achieve those goals. So while the standards may be slightly different, the process is very similar regardless of your role as a teacher, administrator, or superintendent.
And if I could jump in here,
Absolutely.
that's part, because of that parallel structure, that's one of the reasons why we can utilize technology to help us out in that regard, because the structures are very similar. The systems that we can put in place lend themselves to a technological solution. And additionally to that, there's some reporting requirements in order to comply with the Race to the Top. There's things we're going to have to demonstrate. That's another motivation for putting together a technological component to this, as far as gathering that information.
And I would just add, so some of the other features of this new system that are different from previous systems, there's a real focus on regular routine observations of practice. So in our old system, and which is typical for most districts in Massachusetts, there'd be infrequent but lengthy observations. So it might be once every other year for a teacher who has professional teacher status. You'd come in for a full class period, so 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the level. And that would be the observation. And in this model, it's much more frequent, much shorter observations, so that administrators are getting a better sense of how folks are teaching and impact on kids over time, and looking at patterns. Because as we all know, everyone has good days and bad days. And the one other shift is that they're unannounced. So it's really trying to be reflective of the day-to-day, what happens routinely in classrooms, instead of being focused on kind of formal. There is still, particularly for non-professional teachers, teachers in the first 3 years in the district, an element, but trying to get away from focusing everything on announced observations, which one of my teacher colleagues when I was teaching at Fort River called a dog and pony show. We don't want to have everything like that. We really want to see what's happening on a daily basis. And the idea is that the feedback that's given, both on things that are going great and patterns that we want to continue to see and maybe even span to other teachers, as well as feedback that's more constructive in nature, should be based on being in rooms frequently. Shouldn't be based on a one-time look. So that's also another significant change.
So it's very honest and accurate.
That's the
and
goal.
Current.
Yeah, and the research would indicate that this, the once every year, once every 2 year longer observations that are announced, they don't typically yield the results that we want to yield. But these shorter, more frequent observations, the kind of feedback and dialogue that happens between teachers and administrators, or administrators and their superintendent, because it's the same those ways as well, can affect classroom practice or administrative practice at a much higher level.
So when teachers are being observed by principals, I'm assuming, and you
It could
and
be
your team?
it could be other administrators as well, depending on the roles. Yeah.
So do they enter the information of their observations on their laptop and that goes immediately to the database, or is this something that might take a little bit to get back to the teachers. Are the teachers able to read their feedback immediately?
Pretty much. It depends to a large extent on the style of the particular evaluator, but they can certainly, and that's again where the technology can help us. If they're sufficiently facile with typing, they can do the observation in the classroom with an iPad, a notebook, or laptop type computer, make the notes. They may potentially want to edit because they may be taking notes like you do in a class, a lecture hall type class. They may want to edit them, but then as soon as they are finished with that, it's immediately available to the teacher to look at and comment on, and there's that dialogue that happens immediately. So that's one of the great things about the technology. It's not a piece of paper that's disappearing into some folder somewhere that then needs to get looked at, edited, typed, recycled, and it's immediately available for people to look at, think about, reflect on, perhaps make some changes in time for the next observation, which could be very soon thereafter.
Right.
And so the ability for it, even though the entire evaluation process is not complete, for you to have impact and feedback to that educator is much greater.
And I would add that there, as Doug mentioned, there's a capability for feedback to be two ways. So, for instance, a teacher might read something, and because the evaluator or their observer is only in for a shorter amount of time, they might ask a question. So it allows for the opportunity, and we always love face-to-face dialogue, but there's sometimes it's hard to find each other during the school day because we have kids there, for dialogue to be done in that way as well. And our administrators and teachers are doing some face-to-face dialogue, but often the email dialogue or through our network, our data system has been working really well and functioning at a high level. So it's really, that's what we want. We want there to be dialogue. We don't want it to be one-way communication. It should be two-way communication.
In real time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that Mike mentioned when we were first putting this out in some general conversations was that one of the primary goals of an evaluation system is not about sort of scolding people and telling them about what they did wrong, but it's about improving what they do and making them and helping them get better at what they do. And so by having that quick feedback, that allows us to do that. And so I think it's really a positive tool to help us do that. Secondarily, by having a technological solution to this to a large degree, allows us, because the data is all sort of kept together, to do some analysis on a broader, longer view of things. So we can look at this longitudinally over time with a given instructor and see how things have changed over time. We can look at it across the district, across grade levels, across any different sort of slice, look at how people are assessing themselves, what things are they noticing, what things are they commenting on as far as things they'd like to work on. Are we seeing trends and commonalities among things? Are the strengths and weaknesses both, so that we could potentially take and utilize that from a central point of view to provide more support and better support to the teachers.
And just continuing on that theme, so part of my position is actually to take a look and observe the evaluations that are taking place and offer feedback for the observers. So really what we want is the technology creates a system where someone in my role can look at all the observations that have taken place and without the context of seeing the lesson, but I can offer feedback and try to norm our observations, because a teacher at Fort River and a teacher at the high school and a teacher at Wildwood and a teacher at Pelham, so on and so forth, should have the right, and I think we're doing well by this, to have a fair observation of their practice with observers who have been normed on their practices of observing. And so we're spending a lot of time at our district meetings this year watching video of teaching, and doing that process via SurveyMonkey, another technology tool, so that we can instantly look at how the group felt and where the outliers are and have discussions, because one of the things if you look at research around observations or evaluation systems, it's only as good as the quality of the feedback and expertise of the observer. And so we're really working hard at that in Amherst, so that when we're offering feedback to teachers, it's high quality feedback, and it's not based on what someone likes instructionally. It's based on what's best for kids and a strong research base. And it just wouldn't be possible without the technology tools that we have.
And are teachers receptive to this? Are they receptive to you walking into their classroom unannounced and doing what you need to do? And do you get the sense that they're comfortable with you in the room and they're just continuing business as usual and instructing our children? So
it's not that much of a change for many people. A lot of our administrators routinely would check in classrooms. So I don't think, I've taken trips with many of the observers and administrators to do that, and it doesn't seem like no one drops a book, right? Pencils are all in hands. Kids are writing or typing, as it were. And instruction continues. And it doesn't seem that it's created
Like an invasive atmosphere.
no, because our administrators, there's not a gotcha attitude
No.
from our evaluators. Everyone's looking at what's instructional practices, and because we have such strong teachers in Amherst, the amount of positive feedback our teachers are getting, which is important. We want to acknowledge the things that teachers are doing well so they get that feedback, which is equally, if not more important than the alternative. I think people are feeling good that their work is being recognized in that way on a more frequent basis.
It seems like it's really supportive and strength-based.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think Doug's other point I wanted to jump on as well is over time we can see the types of things that our teachers are doing really well and the types of comments that are more constructive in nature, and try to do an analysis so that we can provide development and professional development and support for that in a way that we could never have, without a database that Doug's been in charge of. It would be too scattered to be able to do that. But the idea is if there are needs, instructional needs that a group of teachers have, we want to be able to provide that professional development for those areas. And it really facilitates a high level of analysis, not at the individual teacher, but at the district or elementary versus secondary at that level. That just wasn't possible before.
And it makes sense with our collaborative model.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
consistent throughout all buildings now. So
Absolutely.
there are definitely benefits to this.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also just the consistency of it's the same in every building, it's the same in districts. So I led a workshop last week with principals and some teachers in other districts, and we're all talking the same language. And I think there's a real benefit even cross-district that we can have some of these conversations, and we could have a workshop on observing or practice or evaluating that actually people not just in one district can go to, because everyone has pretty much a similar model. So I think we'll, on a district level, our collaboration with other districts will only increase because of it as well.
Right. But then also, just to that point, is that if you have teachers that come from another district to come to work for us, in the next couple of years after having gone through similar evaluation processes and others, it won't be foreign to them to come here and experience the same sort of thing. So it will be familiar to them to have people in their classroom doing observations, getting similar kinds of feedback. Now, it won't be identical by any stretch, but it will be similar. And so, their expectations will be normed as well, even if they're not from our district or having been in our district over the last year or so.
And just jumping a little bit, the superintendent, it is slightly different for the superintendent. One is that her evaluation is public, whereas all the teachers, and I think it's an important point, all our teachers and administrators' evaluations are not public information, they're personnel information. So unfortunately for Maria, her evaluation's public, but she also has modeled it. So last year the school committee used the rubric, even before they had to, for her evaluation, because they also wanted to get used to it and see exactly how it was going to work. But she has a very, very similar process, but her process plays out in public, both with sharing her goals, which she's already done this year, mid-cycle review, a summative evaluation. So kind of if people want to see it in action, the school committee, because of the nature of the laws around superintendent evaluation, they do a lot of those similar things, but with the cameras there.
Yeah, very transparent.
Yes, absolutely.
With the Amherst media in the room.
That's right. That's right.
So once all these evaluations are, I guess, kind of stored in this data warehouse, does DESE have anything to do with this? Are they privy to this information? Do they have access to see how Amherst as a district is doing?
So yeah, I can jump in on that. So I think their big concern, and I've talked to people at DESE directly about this, is that most districts, ours was similar, had essentially what amounted to a pass-fail system on their evaluations before. So some districts called it satisfactory, not satisfactory, but there was really two categories for teachers to be grouped in. The state plan, the model system, has 4. So they're interested in exemplary, proficient, needs improvement, and unsatisfactory, I think. And so their concern at the state level is that districts would just put all their teachers in exemplary. And we have great teachers in Amherst, but the standard for exemplary is incredibly high. So one of the things that we did at the beginning of the year is we were explicit with teachers. We had them read the standards. And if you read what you would need to be rated exemplary, I think it clarifies what that actually is. So their guidance has been that 10% of teachers across the state should be in that exemplary category, give or take. And if 80% of a schools or a district's teachers are exemplary, they claim they're going to come and want to see a school that has that. So I think their interest is that they're rigorous. The evaluations are rigorous. They're honest. They're fair. They're transparent. And really, they're going to ask for some data back to make sure that's true. They're not concerned at the individual teacher level, but they are concerned how districts and schools, the rigor with which they're evaluating their teachers, that they're following through, and the number of observations that they're supposed to. So the bar has been raised in terms of the administrator workload, to be fair, and also the compliance end of making sure that the observations take place on time, the evaluation takes place on time, artifacts that teachers give are on time. So it has, the stakes are a little higher, but it's not higher in terms of I want to observe that teacher. They're not concerned at that, but they do want to make sure that all teachers receive a fair evaluation and receive an evaluation that is consistent with the regulations.
Okay.
And so from a reporting standpoint, like Mike said, is that, again, they're not going to want to know specifically teacher A's goal set per se, but what they do want to know is that, that the evaluation process happened, that the observations happened, that an ultimate rating was given, and that sort of thing. So, but by having a system where we're recording all of this, then we're going to glean out just those pieces the state needs. And again, if we had a paper system or the classic system we've used in the past, it's much more difficult to compile that information to report it. And we've got 3 districts to do that for, so we always have 3 sets of everything to do when we go to state reporting. So it's always kind of intricate, and there's always little wrinkles with each of the different districts and each of the different pieces. So again, by having this technology, it allows us to really harness that to answer those questions for the state, and yet still, do the things we need to do in the local environment, and all at the same time. And so as those observations are happening, as those feedback and dialogues are happening that are immediately useful and integral to the process for the individual teacher, we're also gathering that piece of information that we need to ultimately give back to the state without having to record it, then re-record it, then re-record it, and then pass it along. So it's kind of a 2 birds with 1 stone sort of thing, but we do and will keep those pieces that are private, and those pieces that need to then be ultimately compiled and reported will be done easily.
Yeah, I just want to dovetail back to something we were talking about a couple minutes ago. So another really nice connection between this system and our district has been the focus on collaboration. So for instance, when teachers are writing a professional practice goal or a student learning goal, particularly on the professional practice side, they wrote them in teams. So the idea is that we have such great expertise from talented teachers in Amherst that outside people are great, but having a 4th grade team or having people who are teaching the same math course at a middle school, high school level sit together and really spend time in the expertise that each of them bring to the table is great. So, what we had is just about everybody writing at least one of their goals as a team, which is very consistent with our superintendent's vision, our district improvement plan. But it's also been a very natural fit in Amherst, which is not a natural fit everywhere. And I think that has been, and our teachers have done a fantastic job about taking this on. This was a new system for them, and I would just want to make sure I compliment them for taking things on. Everything felt rushed at the beginning of the year, because it does, because there's so much going on for teachers at the beginning of the year. And yet they wrote outstanding goals and are working diligently towards them. So I feel very fortunate to work in this environment, taking on this very large new system. And sure, there are hiccups from time to time, but it's been relatively smooth, which is important because there are additional components that get added for the next 2 years. So we have I'd say we're about 80% done in terms of what's expected this year. We're in good shape, but the extra 20% are requirements that come out in the 2nd and 3rd year of implementation. So we still have work to do.
But you've covered a lot of ground in a relatively short amount of time, and involving hundreds of teachers.
Yeah, and one of the things also that worked well in terms of our system is we had 2-day training in the summer, and we had about 40 people at the training, and about half of those were teachers from every school in our district was represented.
That's great.
And so everyone got a sense, because we wanted teachers to not always have to go to their evaluator if they had a question about the system, so we wanted to make sure that teacher leaders could be accessible to other teachers in their buildings. But the other thing is we went through the standards document and we identified priority areas that the group felt were consistent with the district improvement plan, school improvement plans, and basically they picked out parts of the standards document that they thought if we did well on this, it'll improve our students' outcomes. So we had lots of teachers in the room, really lively discussions, some of the better educational discussions I've had, because all the standards are good, right? All these elements in the standard documents are good, but how do you prioritize within that? So we had teachers' voice at the table from the beginning. We had a working group last year that worked out some of the details on this, again, with many teachers and our Teachers Association present. So I think because we've reached out and worked well in a collaborative context with our Teachers Association, individual teachers, groups of teachers, everyone had a training in the fall. I've been back to every school at least once since then to support. I think that the reason it's working is because we have structure set up and our teachers have really taken this on. And the idea of the system is if we have teachers getting high quality feedback, if we have teachers working collaboratively together, that's going to improve student outcomes, right? That's like the math problem, be collaboration plus, high quality feedback. That's what's going to make a difference for kids. And it's really working here in Amherst because of everyone's teamwork.
And that was my next question. I think
Sorry.
you kind of, you kind of hit on that, the student success. And how
Right.
can we correlate that to this new system? Is there going to be a way where, it's very obvious how we could connect these two pieces and get an accurate view of how our students are succeeding?
Sure. So, I'm sorry.
Well, the thing I was going to say to that is that if we have team goals or we have specific goals that have specific targets and the goals are supposed to be SMART goals, which means that there's, one of the key components is that it's measurable. And so in building those kinds of goals and working toward those goals, if we're successful in achieving those goals and being able to look at that in a given grade level in a given school or across a grade level across the district or whatever, then we should be able to look at outcomes and see how successful we were or we weren't. And even if we could, if the data is good enough, we might be able to flesh out if it wasn't successful or if it was partially successful, what pieces worked well, what didn't. And again, that allows us to develop professional development for people or to refine how we write the goals and what we're seeking to work toward as we move ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on to what Doug was saying, so every teacher, every educator, I shouldn't just say teacher because there's multiple people in this, wrote a student learning goal, which was an outcome-driven goal talking about what students will be able to do at the end of the year or 2 years, depending on the length of the plan. So there is a direct correlation between every educator in Amherst and a student-related outcome. In the next couple of years, some of that, like last 15-20% of the system that we have to implement will be a multiple measures part. So it's trying to see what's teachers' impact on students over a multi-year, multiple measures way, so that we're also correlating the evaluation system with student achievement. That's not happening this year. Next year we have to pilot something, and we're going to work on that this spring to be implemented the following year. So we do have some things in place now, and part of the system also includes those additional pieces over time.
Wow. We have less than a minute left.
Sure.
But I know a lot of parents, guardians, community members are watching. And is there maybe a website that parents can go to learn a little bit more about this system? Maybe DESE has a website that we could put up on the screen, but would that be an accurate place for people to visit?
I think so, if they're interested, particularly if they're interested in the standards that the teachers, the folks teaching their kids or administrating their kids' schools have. I think that's a good place. The other good place is actually massteacher.org, which is the Teachers Association website.
Okay.
That's a really nice, almost like oral history of how it all came to be. And I think both those websites, they're different, but they do give parents, guardians some information if they wanted to know a bit more.
Okay, well this has been great. I've learned a lot, and I know our viewers have as well. So I want to thank you both, Doug and Mike, for joining me today. And I also want to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in to this edition of Voices from Our Schools. I hope you and your family enjoy a wonderful holiday season and a wonderful new year. Thank you.